So Liverpool host Manchester City live on Sky Sports on Sunday, and to look ahead to the big game, I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Sky Sports pundit Jamie Carragher. Jamie, thanks for coming on. Now, that Liverpool defeat to Brighton wasn't in the script for the build-up to this game. So where does it leave Liverpool now in the title race, but also in terms of their mindset going into this pivotal game at Anfield?
I think Andy Robertson has come out and said Liverpool aren't in the title race, and I think that's actually the right thing to be looking at it at this moment. And I think Liverpool have got to be looking at top four positions and saying the obvious, take each game as it comes, really, because at this moment the form is so up and down. There's so many changes to the team. You're never quite sure what the team's going to be. So for last night, Alisson's out. You know, that's sort of a last minute thing. Still waiting for players to come back. So I think from now, I think if you'd offered Liverpool top four, I think they'd take that and shake on it, really. And I think that should be the mindset for Liverpool. That's what they're aiming for at this moment. And if they could get back into the title race, and to do that, they have to beat City on Sunday. I truly believe that. Then maybe with, 7 or 8 games to go, I think you could maybe see where they are, and hopefully, from Liverpool's point of view, City could have some sort of drop-off, because I think the run they're on at the moment is out of this world, and it is impossible to keep that going. You can't win every single game. Although I think both teams virtually did that a couple of years ago, but I'd expect some points drop by City at some stage. But I think the problem for Liverpool is that gap at the moment is too big, certainly if they don't beat them on Sunday.
Just seems incredible, doesn't it, that we're saying Liverpool might be out of the title race at the start of February. But I guess, they've not won more than 2 Premier League games in a row all season. So even if they won against Man City on Sunday, do they really have the consistency or the depth in their squad with all the injury problems to actually go on a run to close what is now a huge gap, really, of 7 points? And of course, City have got a game in hand as well.
No, I don't think they do. And I don't think many Liverpool supporters believe Liverpool can win the league if they win on Sunday. I'm just saying, if there is any sort of hope, they have to win on Sunday. I think anything less than 3 points completely finishes it off. I think it's hanging by a thread at this moment, but it's maybe not even just the points difference between City. I think it's the situation that Liverpool find themselves, and the teams they're having to put on the pitch at this moment. They're not strong enough to win a title. The teams that are going out at this moment, really. And the same players are playing week in, week out because of those injury problems. So they're not in the best of form, them. And I think at times some of them are looking shattered, really, and could do with a break themselves. But because of injuries in other positions, they can't really afford to give them that break that they maybe deserve or need, really. Yeah. So, no, I think most Liverpool supporters now resign themselves to the fact that they won't be retaining the title. But ones who feel there's always still a chance, will never give up anything, like most supporters are, like, I think would, feel Liverpool have to win on Sunday.
Yeah. Obviously, Alisson was the latest player out on Wednesday night. He was down with illness, and that obviously goes along with Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip, Fabinho, Mane, Jota, Keita. It's a hell of a team we're putting together there with all the players that are out. It's cruel luck. But, Jamie, is there anything Liverpool could have done differently to prevent these injuries from leaving them where they're 24 points worse off than they were at this stage last season? Is there anything that Klopp or the recruitment team or the players could have done to have prevented it from being this bad?
You say this bad, I mean, Man City were in the same position last season. I think they were 20 points behind Liverpool last season at this stage. I think Liverpool are 7 points behind. So you see how difficult it is, maybe when you've won the title. I know City did retain it, but as I said, City lost Laporte last season, and it seemed to derail their season. Liverpool have had a lot more problems than that. I mean, really, when you name all those players, but it's mainly the centre-back situation, really. I mean, the other players you mentioned, the keeper, Mane, really, that's the odd game here and there. That happens. That's football. You have to accept that. But when you look at the fact that Liverpool's big injuries have all come in the same position, that's the problem. I mean, you'd be a freak if you had 3 players out for the season. But for them all to be in the same position, that's a big problem. But we should also mention that, Liverpool, Man City this season have struggled with strikers. Really, Aguero's not had a proper run. Jesus was in last night, but you always know they're going to come back at some stage, or there's one of them there. So it's never been perfect for Man City. But it's just when someone's out for the season, you can never rely on them, really. And that's the problem for Liverpool. And it's had a knock-on effect with midfield. And And the problems haven't really been defensively. It's been actually breaking teams down, really. But I just think it's all culminating in a knock-on effect, really, from the injuries they've had at central defence. But some of the performances, we can't just put it all down to, defenders being out and that. I think, the performance against Brighton was really poor. It really was. And as I said, it's just whether these players are sort of shattered at this stage, really, mentally and physically, through playing so many games over the last few years, or playing so many games this season, maybe not having as much rotation as probably certain players need as well. But as I said, I mean, Man City were in this position last season. Liverpool are in this position this season. And they've just got to get through it, make sure they get top 4, really, and try and have a little run in the Champions League.
Yeah, just before we move on to Man City, Jamie, you were calling for them to bring in a centre-back as soon as possible when that January transfer window opened. They eventually did it right at the end with Ben Davies from Preston and Ozan Kabak from Schalke. What was your view on that business in the end?
Well, to be honest, I should have mentioned that in your question before, but I said at the time I didn't think Liverpool could win the league without Virgil van Dijk. And they actually surprised me how well he'd done, I think, in the month or 6 weeks later after that. But I did feel they had to sign a big centre-back on January the 1st. Now, it's easy for me to say that. I don't know the financial situation. I don't know the players who are available. So, I think it was always going to be very difficult to achieve that, really. But the players that they brought in now, I would like that to have happened a month ago, really. And I don't think those signings would have came in only for Matip being out for the rest of the season. So if that injury wouldn't have happened to Matip, I think Liverpool would have stuck with what they've got, really, and kept their the money available, really, at the end of the season. So they brought 2 players in. It's quite interesting that Liverpool are buying a player. And to be honest, I don't know too much about any of these players. I've only obviously seen little highlights now since they've signed, but one's for $500,000 from Preston, and the rest in add-ons, and another one's on loan for $500,000. So I think it shows the difficulties Liverpool, and maybe other clubs will find out, certainly at this moment, and maybe in the summer, are finding it financially. With the pandemic, with the uncertainty in the future, will there be crowds back? Maybe TV deals? I don't know what it is. There's probably a lot more to it than we probably even realise financially. And it just shows where one of the biggest or richest clubs in the world are at the moment financially. The fact that they couldn't go and buy, I wouldn't say a proper centre-back, but in terms of like the one I was talking about, maybe that may come in the summer, but I'm not even sure about that. To be honest, I think if Kabak comes in and does well, and they can then buy him for 18 million, I think that'll be Liverpool done at centre-back, and they'll wait for the 3 centre-backs to come back, and they'll have him and obviously Davis from Preston. That'll give you, a few numbers in there as well. But it certainly wasn't the 50, 60 million pound defender that maybe I felt that they needed at some stage to fill in this season. And maybe I was a little bit too optimistic with the situation financially for all clubs.
Yeah, sure. Well, in contrast, Man City obviously going to this game full of confidence, a club record run of 13 wins in a row, 20 unbeaten in all competitions, and even without missing Aguero and De Bruyne themselves, aren't they? So how have they produced, Jamie, such consistency, easy for me to say, when we've seen so many teams, not just Liverpool, so many teams struggle to put sustained runs of results together? City have managed to do it, haven't they?
Yeah, and I just go back to that signing. I actually think at this moment, I'd say Ruben Dias is the player of the season. I really believe that. There's a lot of obviously attacking players in the league who've done really well, but I do believe he's completely changed their situation. He's never injured. He plays every single game. City are now a team who are more, they're not defensive, but they're winning this league by keeping clean sheets. As I said, they haven't got Aguero, they haven't got even Sane and Sterling, who's probably not been at his best this season. David Silva's moved on, so De Bruyne's out at the moment, so they haven't got that the free flowing stuff that we've seen over the last sort of 3 or 4 years under Pep Guardiola. They're almost winning it, or being top of the league and on this great run in a different way. And it's keeping clean sheets, and people almost going into games thinking they can't score against City. Now, Pep's teams have always had a really good defensive record, no matter where he's been, more often than not. But I think the signing of Diaz, I actually felt if that signing didn't go well, it could be huge problems for sort of this City Pep project going forward, because Pep normally only does, I think, 4 years. I think this may be his fifth year, or his fourth or fifth year, certainly, at Man City. And on the back of the disappointment last season, especially in the Champions League, I think the Champions League would have hurt Man City a lot more than the league last year, really, because, Liverpool and City have been fighting it out, and it was just, it was Liverpool's go, if you like. But I think that the Champions League with big teams going out, I think that would have really hurt City, who they went out to and how they went out, and they had to rectify it at centre-back. They brought two in. Aki hasn't really played, but to have said Laporte would not be a regular at centre-back for City this season, I think shows how well John Stones and Diaz's partnership has been. But for me, it's all about Diaz. I think he's been absolutely outstanding.
It just has a knock-on effect, Jamie, doesn't it, around the rest of the team? That whole defence just looks or feels so much more secure with him in it. It looks like the confidence around the players around him has all gone up a level with that security he's brought.
Yeah, it does. And I think great centre-backs do that. They make other players play well. I think that's what he's doing. I'm not taking nothing away from John Stones, but I think John Stones' improvement as well. I'd credit Diaz with some of that as well. I really do believe that he's an organiser. I could see that early on. He was talking, pushing people up. There was a goal at Chelsea that Man City scored, the first one, and when they were all celebrating, he was actually in the middle of the players, who he doesn't probably know that well. He's only been there a few months, and he was almost organising them while they were sort of celebrating. So when the kickoff came, I thought that's a really big thing, especially for a young player and a new player as well. So yeah, I think they've got a top player. And yeah, he cost a few quid. I think it was from Benfica, but he's got great leadership qualities as well. So when we're talking about, Vincent Kompany never being replaced, I'm not saying he's an identical sort of player, but he's definitely got leadership qualities like Vincent Kompany.
Yeah, and it's 6 Premier League clean sheets in a row for City now. So how did Liverpool go about it then, Jamie, on Sunday? How do you go into a game when against a rival who you need to beat them? A draw's not going to be good enough. How do you approach that sort of match?
Well, there's no secrets with Liverpool, how they'll play. They have caused City huge problems before. I think Pep Guardiola said this Liverpool team is the toughest team he's played against maybe in his managerial career. It's not the Liverpool team that we've seen in the last couple of years. We've seen that this season, but I think it will be completely different to what we saw at Brighton. I'd expect the goalkeeper to be back. I think Fabinho could be back at centre-back. Maybe the new centre-back players as well. You can put Henderson in midfield. And I think Mane will be back. So it almost feels like if that was to be the case, that almost half the team's different already, really. So I think it'll be a lot stronger proposition if that's the team for Liverpool. And I think Liverpool will give City a really good game. I really do believe that. I mean, because let's not forget City, as I've said, they're almost a different City. There's no De Bruyne, no Aguero, really. But this season's on about, keeping clean sheets. But Liverpool have been struggling to score goals against a certain type of teams, I would say. But I wouldn't class City as a defensive team. They're just very good defensively. I think there's a big difference. But they will still attack Liverpool. They look to hate Liverpool because obviously they're weak at centre-back. So it should be a really good game. And I think Liverpool's performances against even Man United in the Cup, West Ham, Spurs as well, teams who were at home, so the onus was on them to come out and play a little bit. Liverpool looked a lot more at their best. And I think City will look to win the game. I don't think they'll just sit back and never put players forward. So I think it should make a really interesting game. And Liverpool will be a lot stronger. So it's still a game Liverpool can win, even on the back of the poor performances and results they've had at home and the struggles of late. It's still certainly a game Liverpool can win. And I think Pep Guardiola will know that, really. So I still think it should be a fascinating game. Yeah,
it's interesting. The story's changed around it a little bit with that midweek result, but it should be a really interesting game, as you say, Jamie. Thanks for that. Liverpool versus Man City from 4:00 on Sky Sports on Sunday with kickoff at 4:30. Jamie, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks, Pete.